Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Aches, Pains, and Gains podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Thomas. Over there, I got...
Yo, you got your boy Danny Hines coming in.
Welcome back to the 10th episode. We finally made it to the double digits.
The big 1-0. That's crazy.
And we got a very special episode lined up today. We're interviewing Blaine Mackie, the man himself. Blaine, how are you doing today?
I am really good, thanks.
Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Just before we get rolling here, folks, if you've been listening for a while, if you're new around here, please like, share, subscribe wherever you are. If you're looking for coaching, bridgecitybarbell.com, you can find that, or you can reach out at Bridge City Barbell YXE on Instagram. If you got questions for myself or even our guests today, you can go to the Aches, Pains, and Gains .podcast on Instagram. Reach out, ask some questions. We can always forward them over to Blaine as well if you guys have any questions for him in general. So today, Danny, what are we going to be talking about a little bit?
Well, we have a very long time gentleman that we've been around. Blaine Mackie. He's a physiotherapist here in Saskatoon with Mackie Physio. I've had a lot of experience going over there and, being a banged up powerlifter. Getting a lot of treatment from them. But we're going to be going through his story, and it's going to be a good one.
Absolutely. So Blaine, want to tell the good folks here a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Well, first of all, thanks, Danny and Thomas, for having me on. This is pretty special. I'm pretty humbled by being able to, tell a story, because this will be the first time ever that I've told my story publicly. There's been little hints and bits out there, but I think this will be a great venue with respect for you two guys for asking me and then being able to tell my story. I'm a physiotherapist. I've been doing manual therapy exclusively for the last 30 years. And my specialty is working on spines that don't work, and loving necks, backs, pelvises, thoracic spines, that sort of stuff. And that's kind of where I've kind of migrated to. The more difficult, the better. And I guess that's part where I am in my career with respects to pushing that level in where what can't be changed, can we still change it? I think that's my shtick right now, in the sense of doing that. And that takes into everything from the lifting component to the manual therapy and the biomechanics and the physics and the nervous system, et cetera, is all tied together. So that's kind of what I do. That's all day long. So, yeah.
I wanted to double check something too. You've been practicing for about 35 years, is it now? Or
yeah,
36?
I got my 30-year pin, but I think I've been actually doing manual therapy for probably about 33 now, I believe, give or take.
And when did you graduate from physiotherapy?
1992.
Right.
Yeah, 1992. And then I went down to the States for 2 years right after that. I was headhunted, basically. I threw my name out there down in the States, and a headhunter found me, and they took me to South Dakota. And that was kind of funny, because I'm just this little farm kid from Manitoba, and somebody says, yeah, we'll bring you down here and we'll pay you. Okay. So I ended up in South Dakota.
Yeah.
But I could have traveled all over the United States with a headhunter saying, no, I want to try New York. I want to try Chicago. No, I stopped in Rapid City, South Dakota. So it was a bit of an experience, but it was fun. It was good.
And I wanted to ask as well, when you've been lifting for quite some time, as I understand.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when and why did you kind of find your way to the iron?
Okay, so this brings back the big story.
Sure.
So in probably the I'm going to go early 1970s, late 1970s is when I probably started. So I was just a farm boy in Manitoba. And this is a typical story in the back of the magazine and back of the comic. So I was getting my ass kicked in the school. So there was a group of guys, about I'm going to say 7 or 8. It was probably 2, but 7 or 8 sounds better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I was just getting my ass kicked every which way in this little town. So I thought, okay, how do I kind of strategize around this besides running? And so my brother-in-law, Mark Hicks, he was a black belt judo. And so he was super, super strong at that time for me. And so he says, well, let's get you started on lifting weights. So I started, and I had the little red bench with the narrow uprights
Yeah,
and the barbell that had a loose sleeve on it, and the plastic weights with the
like the
cement in them.
Filled with sand or cement,
So I got that. He bought me that, I believe, and then I figured, okay, well, I got to go better than this. So my dad actually bought just a ton of 1-inch square tubing, and I could weld. So I'm going to build myself a squat rack. So down in the garage, I built myself one of those slant squat racks that you have to actually walk out about 12 steps to clear the rack. So I built one of those because that's all I knew. And then I put a lat attachment on it and stuff like that. And then I pieced it together, moved it down into my basement, and I started to lift. And then the occasional time my welds weren't good, so I broke it. And so I had to take it back out down to the shop and then weld it and then bring it back down again. Oh, but that's kind of where I started. And then I just started to grow. So I was 14, I think, 13, 14 years old then. And then still doing the hockey thing in Manitoba. And then, and then 16 hit, and that's where it all stopped. And that's where I had a major accident. So I'll probably fill you guys in on that because this will be the first time ever that I've spoken publicly about it. It's a bit of a story. Hopefully you can sit down, have some time. It'll be a little hard for me, so bear with me.
Sure.
So it was, I was hauling road hay. So road hay means that me and another guy, he would drive the tractor with a rack behind it. He'd drive along the road, the grid road. I'd run down, grab a bale, jump up, put it on the rack, stack it, run back down, do it again. This kid didn't want to get off the tractor, so I did it all day, and I was just beat at the end. And I jumped in my truck at the end, and then that was the last thing I remember. And I woke up a month later out of a coma, and I was in Brandon General Hospital. And a month went by, woke up and didn't know where I was. Couldn't move anything. Couldn't move my legs. Couldn't move my arms. And then the story is kind of pieced together. Jumping forward, when I was in physio school, I actually went back to that hospital and pulled my file out of archives. And they allowed me to sit with somebody and research my file. Jumping back to that day, so when I woke up, I was actually a quad. And that was for a while. And
quad meaning quadriplegic, correct?
Yeah. And so there was really frustrating because the neurologist would come in, and I remember this because all he would do is take a needle and stick it in my leg. He's waiting for a response. And so that was good. My mom and dad, I think I aged them severely because when I went into the hospital, the trauma surgeon came out to them, according to what they told me, and said, just like, we're going to get you a social worker and a priest, and he won't be around in the morning.
Wow.
So, but I woke up again a month later, approximately, and first things out of my mouth was, Jesus Christ, this hurt. What happened? But I couldn't move. The movement loss was because of the inflammatory state in the spinal cord and the brain. So then I pieced this all together, and moving forward, I went through a lot of rehab. I was on my back for a while with the traction bolted into my head over the end of the bed. And then I remember I had to learn how to eat through, because I couldn't move my head. So they put the tray on my stomach, and then they give me mirror glasses. You'd look in the mirror and look down at your food, but everything was backwards. So I had food all over the place. So that was bad. So I was in bed doing that, and I had my own little space, and I just waited. Couldn't go to the bathroom. So that was interesting because they had orderlies. Do you guys remember orderlies? Yeah, orderlies. So they would be male kind of guys that would come around, and he would help me get rid of my stool by sticking his finger up and pulling my stool out because I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So it was embarrassing for a 16-year-old boy, but that's part of the story. That's part of the stuff.
Yeah.
Then what happened? I guess just I had to wait until I got surgery because I did break my neck. So I pieced some of this together. It's a little disjointed, but so I broke for anatomy out there. So C3 fracture, 4 fracture, 5 fracture, 6 fracture, 5 fracture, 6 fracture, 7 fracture, T1 fracture, T2 fracture, T12 fracture. And that's where the problem occurred, is because C5 slid forward on C6 and smashed my posterior lateral tracts, my spinal cord. So that left me with, and that's what they had to stabilize. So I'm fused up and jammed up, and they put bone from my hip into my neck, et cetera, et cetera. So that all healed. But I'm left with a neural disorder called Brown-Séquard. And Brown-Séquard is where one part of my body doesn't feel hot, pain, or cold from about my chest down. And then the other side is smaller and weaker. So my calf and my quad and my glute on my right is significantly smaller than my left. Yeah, and that's then they got that all fused up and done. They put me in a striker bed. They flipped me over. They did the surgery, and they had to open me up from the back of my occiput down to between my shoulder blades because they had to look at everything and make sure everything was okay.
Wow.
And so I was pretty lucky that way. And then, and as I pieced all this together as time went on, and I was moved from that hospital to a rehab hospital at Brandon, and then I spent my days rehabbing all day. I just, that was the only thing I knew how to do. I didn't know to sit back, and this kind of creates the philosophy to sit back and feel sorry for myself. I didn't know how to do that. I just was dumb, maybe. I don't know. I just didn't. This is what I do. Okay, so I got to learn how to walk again. So the nurses would walk on beside of me, and I'd get my legs back. As the inflammation decreased on my brain, then the arms and legs came back a bit, except for my right leg. So I learned how to walk again. What did rehab include? Well, I bust up my right hand. I bust up my radius and ulna on the right, dislocated right shoulder, bust up my right elbow. 9 ribs on the right were fractured, pneumothorax on the right. I had a subdural hematoma in my brain. So they had to extract the fluid off my brain as soon as I came in. And I remember because I woke up out of my coma for 1 split second. And that's when they were drilling into my brain. And I could hear the drill going. It was just like at the dentist. It was gross.
Wow.
So I got that done. Then I fractured pelvis. I fractured left femur. And my optic nerve in my brain got smashed somehow. I don't know how, but I don't see out of my right eye. So put all that together, and I just started rehabbing. What had happened, stepping back a little bit, is I rolled my truck. That's what happened. So the police report and what I got off of the medical file and what people told me was that I went off the road. They said probably as a 16-year-old, I tried to turn back on, and it rolled. I got thrown out the front of the windows of the truck. No seatbelts back then. So I got thrown out there and I landed on my back. And this is the cool part of the story, is because I was by a lake, which is between where I was working and my farm. And there was a bunch of people at the lake, and there's 2 neighbors down there. Both were nurses.
Wow.
So they came up because they heard the crash and they found me. How they found me was on my back, but my head was between my shoulder blades. So it was flipped right around underneath. So, but we're in nowhere, Manitoba. So they actually heard me gurgling. And so they pulled my head out from underneath my back in between my shoulder blades, and they put me on a piece of plywood they found down by one of the cabins, stuck me in the back of my best friend's brother's half-ton, took me to meet the oncoming medical team, which in small town Manitoba is retired farmers, and they're just in an ambulance. They took me to Shoal Lake, Manitoba. 2 doctors stayed in there. They actually kept me alive until we got to Brandon, and then that's where trauma took place. So that was kind of the hard part, because when I go through it in my head, it's an ugly kind of situation, which also drives who I am today. So we'll go from there. So then and then back to rehab. And I stayed in rehab for probably 6-7 months in the hospital. Every day, got up. I was when I was training with that weightlifting and that funky rack that I built, I was 160 pounds. I was pumped. And I went down to 80 in the hospital. And then, so I thought, okay, well, what do I do here? So my brother-in-law bought me my first, I don't even know what it was called back there, Muscle and Fitness. It must have been Muscle Builder or something.
Mm-hmm.
It was my Bible.
The magazine.
I would read the advertisements for the whatever was in there over and over again. I was just so caught up in this because I've never been exposed to it before. So I had that in my little space in my hospital. And so my whole space, I had certain things, and that's part of my personality. I have certain things in certain spots. That's where they stay. And then my magazine, and I just had everything that it always had to be in a perfect space. So then I started ordering like triple breakfast from the hospital restaurant or whatever kitchen. And then my brother-in-law would come by and he'd bring me milkshakes, and mom and dad would come in and they would bring me like hoagies and subs, and I just started eating. Yeah. And then I spent my time down in rehab, and I asked the lady, the physio, I said, can I be in here more than an hour? Can I like stay?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, we'll ask your doctor. And he agreed. So yeah, so I stayed down in the rehab, like with the sand weights around my legs and trying to get those to work better, and my hands. I went into, they had me in basket weaving, which we always laugh about, right?
Yep.
But my web of my fingers got cut out.
Oh.
And so they had to get the dexterity back in those fingers, and I couldn't use this wrist because of all the fractures in the hand and the wrist. So I made baskets, and it was interesting because at the end of the time they would put the baskets out for people to purchase.
Oh wow.
Yeah, nobody purchased mine.
No.
They were freaking all over the place. So they were not baskets. But anyways, that was part of it. So yeah, and I just did that over and over and over and over again. And I think that defines who I am. I think it defines my philosophy. I think it defines my work ethic. It defines who I am as a person, as that story. So I deal with that every day. I deal with that every week. I deal with that every year because I have chronic pain. And if I don't train, it gets worse. If I train and I get stronger, I'm much more stable. So my whole life is that story is my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that I do going forward is based on what I went through back then, because I can't get any worse.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my story. And that's why I train. That's why I enjoy coming up against strong guys and say, okay, I'm going to give it my best.
Mm-hmm.
And my ego says, well, okay, I didn't beat Danny in squats, but I'm disabled. I'll use that every time, Danny. I'll use that every time.
That's okay. Yeah.
So that is how I got started in lifting. And so I've never quit ever since. Wow. So
that probably pretty significantly like impacted your philosophy on life, hey?
Huge.
Pretty hard to have a bad day after that.
No kidding.
Yeah, no, it created who I am. It created my philosophy. However that takes shape, because I think philosophies mold depending on where you are in your life. But that's definitely where I've put things together. So so that took over probably a year.
From like accident to discharge, or?
It was probably about 8 months to discharge. And then I was at home, and then they had a, carefully stated, like at the home physio come in, but I was way beyond that because I was training, I was doing all my stuff, not very well because I didn't know what I was doing, but
better than
I
nothing.
was back in. I was causing the body to have some stress. And then I adapted, stress and adapt, stress and adapt, stress and adapt. So, and that's a big part of our clinic today. I will occasionally share that story with somebody that's not having a good day, not to compare, but to motivate.
And show a little just connection and empathy.
Yeah, there's a connection. Like, I'm not just a guy that's read a book. I'm not just a guy that went through university. So that was, it's useful now and again, because once they understand that, and I show them my scars on my back, because I got all the road rash from the road on my back. And that's kind of where it all started. And that's probably the pivotal thing that's made me who I am.
Thank you for sharing that, Blaine.
Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't know that, but
it's an amazing story.
I did a 6-week placement at Mackie, right? Yeah. And honestly, now that you say that, like I see, like honestly, it gives me a better appreciation for what you guys do there. I see it actually built into the clinic and the philosophy, especially with some of the patients and clients that you have. Like some of them have been through some pretty horrific accidents.
Yeah.
And like I don't know, I guess there's just like this certain tenacity that you guys bring to trying to help people, right? And whatever tool that may or may not be, right? So I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. I think you're right. I think you've captured that. I just don't. I don't see giving up. I just, it's not in the cards. If you've had a really bad accident, give your body the opportunity to adapt to the level it can.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe us as an organism can adapt a lot.
Yeah.
But you just need that opportunity, that time, that motivation, that wind beneath your wings sort of thing in order to get you there. And I think anybody can do it. Yeah. I think so.
Especially, having been through it yourself, it's like, no, it's definitely possible.
Yeah. I think
right?
one of the things I see though is that if it's not done like in June, then I can't do it.
Right.
Well, no, June in 2035.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do it. It's just not in your time frame.
Yeah.
And that's a big one that we work really hard on is that, okay, this is going to take a year. This is going to take 2 years. And then once then you've hopefully helped them create a habit that's just part of them now. Yeah. So then they'll just continue on.
It's the process you build
Yeah,
along the way.
Yeah, because I find a lot of people right now, in the essence of as we grow up like younger, my son Luke, like he gets over an injury like in 12 hours.
Yeah.
And that's really powerful for the brain to remember until you're 55, 60. And all of a sudden that same injury now takes 4 months. Okay. And then some people don't tolerate that.
Yeah.
Me, it's just normal. It's been normal since I've been 16.
Yeah, exactly.
So
there was something I wanted to jump to there. You mentioned that you have chronic pain, like likely resulting from this injury, the accident and whatnot. But you still train, and you said your right quad and calf is weaker, and you're almost 60, and you regularly squat in the 400s up to even 500, right?
520, but
yeah,
that's
520.
okay.
Yeah, I don't want to take.
That's okay.
I was going to let you brag.
It's okay.
I wanted you to brag there. So like it's quite impressive again because you apply this philosophy like to yourself, but as well as the people like you work with as well, and the body adapts. So even if you have decreased tone or neural drive to that muscle, like you can still make it adapt and grow, right? Which is
correct.
Super interesting. And just because you're experiencing pain doesn't mean that you can't, functionally enjoy your life, right?
Correct. You have to put pain into perspective. You have to decide whether or not pain is sinister, traumatizing, threatening of the organism, or is it just a nervous system response saying, hey, watch out. But then once you play in that watch out zone, you kind of learn that watch out is I'm okay. I can get through that.
Yep.
Good. The difference, I think, and this is to listeners too, is that I've been dealing with this for 44 years, not since last year. So I've had this huge amount of time to really be intimate with my nervous system and understand how it responds, what's sinister, what isn't, and kind of compartmentalizing that. When it's not sinister, I push. That's
Makes
why it's
sense.
really hard to work for me.
Yeah.
We've talked about pain like quite a few times
Oh yeah.
on the podcast and working through it and stuff. And like we've said before, like, would you rather be weak and experience pain, or would you rather be strong and still experience pain? And like, obviously, like we would pick the latter every time.
Right.
Because like, that's the difference between you, like, and whatever, like in our 80s and 90s of like being able to get up off the chair or pick up your grandkids, from the floor, or, beat your kid in a wrestling match till you're 70 or something, right?
Absolutely.
Like those are the kinds of things that I think are built into being able to maintain this resilience, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's built into the process that's like you're just lifting weights on the surface, but there's all these little trickle down effects that have these massive impacts on every other facet of your life, right?
Absolutely.
So even like the people you meet, right? I met you through lifting. I met Danny. Well, we wrestled first, but we came back together through lifting.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's really, I don't know, just fascinating that there's so much good that comes from it. And it's a big part of your guys' clinic philosophy as well. You got the logo on your shirt there, and the gentleman's doing a front squat, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big part of it, and it's I think helping the people understand what that pain really means.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, lifting is a lifestyle. It's a philosophy. You frame that philosophy however you want to frame it, but lifting is kind of the base to how you want to develop that.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't support people enough lifting. And I don't care. There is an interesting story years ago. Do you guys remember the gym curves?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So you would have I think it was a hydraulic machine, and then you'd have a step pad and it was a circuit.
That's the one. It's like in a circle.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And I always used to be this ego-based power lifter. Well, that was a waste of time. And then this 80-year-old lady taught me. She was a patient of mine, and I was giving her the gears about going to curves, which is actually next door to us. And she says, Blaine, let's get me off the couch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Step back, sit down, Blaine.
Yeah. Wow.
Reset.
Wow.
Reset. So exercise has many different varieties of any different kind of faces to it. We'd like to tend people towards the heavier kind of lifting.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? If they get off the couch, that's super cool.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah, activity is activity, especially when you're that older.
Exactly.
We often
Super
say like,
sedentary.
one set's better than 0 sets.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
Like 100
Totally.
steps is better than 0 steps that you got in the day,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
So
Totally.
like
I say for most of my athletes, showing up's half the battle.
it is. Yeah.
Open the door.
Open the door and get there.
Open the door.
And if you do show up, like you're probably going to do more than you thought you did or you
Yeah.
were going to do in the first
It's always
place,
better
right?
when you show up on time.
Yeah.
so.
Hey, Danny.
Yo, I got the side eye from Blaine. That's crazy.
For context, I told Blaine that we're starting at 11:30. And then I told Danny we're starting at 11. And
I showed up here at 10:50.
yeah, he did.
It
So
was good.
he was actually quite good. And but yeah, Danny sometimes is late. We all know this, but we love him anyway, and it's kind of how it is.
We
you
do
know?
love Danny.
We do love Danny.
Yeah.
And it was just a
appreciate it.
funny little side comment.
And
there.
I couldn't even be mad because it worked.
Yeah,
Like,
it worked.
It worked, yeah.
Danny was like, it's kind of like, I'm not mad, but like, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, I got here. I was like, is Blaine already here? He goes, no, he's getting here at 11:30. I was like, what? What?
So I lied.
So you're going to
okay.
question this every time now?
I might. Well, I'll probably forget about it.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I told him to just keep doing it.
Let me move on.
Maybe I'll,
Yeah.
but now I'll kind of titrate it and balance it a little bit more because
Oh,
it
look at
came
you.
early. So now, now that I have a baseline, I know how much to give him. So then maybe, I'll just kind of find that
Okay.
perfect.
You're like the maestro.
Yeah. I'm going to start spreadsheeting this.
Wow.
And then I'll find the trends. Yeah.
Find that sweet spot. Okay, let's go.
I wanted to
too
throw in there too, Blaine. So you were working with physio in the hospital, right?
Yeah.
Was it there that you were like, oh man, this job is cool? Or when did physio come in the photo or the picture?
Yeah, that's a very cool question because when I was in the hospital, there was like the best that I can frame it would be blinders on. There is nothing more than what I needed to do to get better.
Mhm.
So there's no thought process. It was like an organism just eating to survive,
Yeah.
et cetera. And that was it. So I ate, I trained. I learned how to walk again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the physios were great there. And I had a wonderful physio. And she just let me work. Just let me work. That's all I need to do, which is, I think, between my dad and my mom teaching me work ethic on the farm and that's where I came up with this stupid, probably pathological work ethic. But then I never thought more about it. It's just what I did. Got home from there, continued to work, continued to grow. I missed a year of school. So I stayed for school one more year. So I did grade 13, I guess. But this is the funny part. I graduated with like 51 average.
Oh yeah.
I was dumb. I was dumb. And I was voted the least likely.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Yeah, it was funny. It didn't faze me though, because I just had this, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
What's next? And so then I applied to go to university because my mom actually kicked me off the farm. She says, go try something in the world because this farming thing is not working. So she kicked me off and I go, okay, what do we do? All my buddies went into Brandon, Manitoba, and they just lived in a house together and partied and took college, which is fine and whatever. But I never did that because my focus after the hospital wasn't even friends. It was just work.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have a connection back through high school. So I guess I was looked at as a loner. And then I applied to universities, applied to Brandon, Winnipeg, Saskatoon. None of them accepted me. So I applied to Regina and they said, we accept you on terms. The terms would be you'd have to repeat your grade 12 classes in university. So they took my money to repeat grade 12. And that was a bit of a shit show. This is a small town kid with one thought, and that's to outwork anybody that's put in front of him. And now moving to the big city. And that didn't go well. So I was trying to figure out the big city, all the people and the class sizes of like 300. And I came from a high school that was like kindergarten to grade 12 had maybe 100 kids in it.
Mm-hmm. Big change.
Yeah, big change. And so that first semester, I got an academic warning on my grade 12. This is embarrassing, but this is my story.
Yeah.
So I go, what do I do with this? Mom and dad are helping me pay the bills, and I'm failing out of university and didn't know how to study. I remember English was funny because at that point you take your English class and you learn a book. I wasn't that great of a reader. And then they go to an essay class. You had an essay thing where it was like a lab. So I wrote my first essay as a start because he wanted to see how we did. And I got it back, and everybody started laughing around me. And I look at my paper, I had a big 0. I got 0 on my first essay. Oh boy, this is not going well. And then the second semester, so I signed up for a few more classes to get my average, I guess, up. And then that's when everything started to change because I met Darcy. So I met Darcy Nicholson at that time, and that's when everything changed. Number one, when I first saw her, I said, "Nah, not a chance. Not even in this universe. In that league,
out of your league,
way out of my league." And so we chatted for a bit in amongst a few people that we knew, and then I didn't know how to go about getting a date because I never had one because I was just focused on one thing in high school and stuff like that. So then, somehow her and I kind of kept crossing paths. And then I got the balls to ask her out to a show. And this is always an ongoing thing because we have two different stories. It was to the Rocky Horror Picture Show at the University of Regina. And so I went over to pick her up and she didn't show up. So the term is she stood me up. And so I failed at that too. This is like depressing, right? I have a disability and nobody likes me.
Yeah, and you can't get girls.
And I can't get girls. And then her story was I didn't tell her the right time or the right day or something.
Yeah.
I think my version is right, but we'll leave that to later. But anyways, we did hook up as in got together later on. And she was, she changed my life. She seriously, she changed my life. I've never met a more wonderful person. She kind of guided me through what to do at school. And she says, "So what do you do? Like what makes you you?" And I said, "Well, work." She says, "Well, why don't you turn that into school?" Because what I was doing, like you just read it and you're supposed to remember it. And that didn't work for me.
Yeah, it didn't work for me
Because
either.
my head injury wouldn't let me, but I didn't nobody taught me.
Yeah.
Right.
Nobody taught me
How to learn.
Mm-hmm. With what I had as a deficit. So then she said, "Well, if you have work ethic, why don't you just work at it?" And I go, "What do you mean?" She says, "Well, if you can't get it on the first read, you have to read it." Like you've heard this story from other people probably, but 7 or 8 times and write it out, etc. Just a way to study.
Yep.
So I figured, I could do that. And so I started doing that, and then things started to take shape. She kind of figured it out. So she kind of saved me from that perspective. It's an interesting story too, because I think that's where my life really started to take shape. And when I look back at it, I think when I guess I died back because I was on life support for a while. When I died back in the hospital, I always made this suggestion, and I do believe in it. I lost my soul. I found it when I found Darcy. So she owns it.
Yeah.
So she owns my soul. So I'm forever in debt to her. So then and then I started figuring it out. And back to your original question is, how did physio come into place? I thought, hey, that'd be a good idea. I like anatomy. Didn't connect it with my accident at all till later on in life. And then I thought, oh yeah, I could do this. And then I applied, and I found out you have to have like some stupid average to get in.
Yeah.
And so at that point in time, I think it was easier because they did let me get an interview, and I failed. So everybody, are you okay? Are you okay? I failed over and over and over. So it wasn't new.
Yeah.
And so what do? I work.
Yeah.
So I did another year of university, got an interview again, failed again. And then my third year, or my last year of university, then I did my last application to physio, got an interview again. And I got crushed in the interview, like crushed. They actually, is interesting because one of the physios out there who is a good friend of mine, she actually interviewed me. She was on the interview panel.
Yep.
And she actually had to stop the interview because one of the interviewers was going up one side of me and down the other, and I was just getting slammed.
Yeah.
So at that point, right in the interview, I'm thinking, what else am I going to do in my life? I'm not doing this. And that was a stupid year that I got in.
Wow.
I have no clue how, because they actually physically said, no, he's had enough. We're done the interview. Okay, that's not good.
Yeah.
So that's the year I got in. So
Wow.
I probably have to thank her, this special physio in Saskatoon here, for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah.
And then I got into, and then I started physio. And then I still didn't connect with what I'd been through, albeit it was always in my face because every rehab thing, everything we did, my injuries were coming obvious. Meaning that when we did postural reviews, well, my posture's all off. Did walking reviews, well, I don't walk straight. Like all that sort of stuff. So the injury continued to remind me of actually probably why I was here. Whether there's a higher power, it just, okay, I'm meant to be here. So that's how that started. And then I used my same work ethic to get through physio. And then graduated with, what's the first one? Honors?
Honors, yep.
Yeah, I think that one. And then everybody's laughing at me. You got honors? Keeps coming back. Sorry, keep hitting me.
Yeah.
Wow. And then that's how physio went. And then I graduated. And my mom and dad were around to see that at that time. So it was good.
That's awesome.
Excuse me. Yeah. And then what happened from there? Holy. Then I went down to the States and did a stint in the States for a couple of years. And I loved being able to treat somebody just with my hands, motivation, drive, work ethic, getting them to adapt, get them to understand that. And so the manual therapy took off like that. And that's, I've been my passion and my religion ever since. So that's where that took place. And then we did 2 years down there. Darcy came down obviously with me because we had got married. And then she said, yes, good thing. And then she came down and she worked in the lab down in the Black Hills Rehabilitation Center as a lab tech. She was a lab tech. And then we came back up here, worked at a clinic for a little bit. And then I decided to do my own thing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting story.
Yeah. Really interesting story.
So what happened after that? A few years at that clinic, and then I decided to stop and do my own thing.
Can I ask why you decided to start your own clinic?
Yeah. My own clinic.
Because it's a lot of work.
It's a pile of work.
Like it's more than just being a physiotherapist now, right?
Yeah. I think I started it because I was not comfortable with the direction at that present time.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed to create my own. Just probably not my own. It's probably out there, but I'll call it my own. So that's when I quit.
So you're talking like the general direction physio was going when you started?
Both at the clinic and general physio direction.
Gotcha.
Still struggling with that now, even to date.
Yeah.
We'll get into that
Mhm.
in a bit.
Yeah.
But so then I stopped. And at that point in time, I sat down and I said, okay, so this is my decision. Had 3 kids. And I said, they can't be feeling anything other than the fact that based on I quit, because I've never quit anything in my life. I didn't want them to take the effect. Okay. So I said, okay, let's go.
Yep.
So I went to work and I told the kids you can still be in gymnastics. You're not going to miss a thing. And then Darcy, amazing. Oh my God. We settled in. We started to plan out the clinic. And I remember us being on the front driveway with boxes and chairs and all sorts of things from my garage and chalk. So we were building our clinic on my front driveway. Okay, how far between this and measure this and how big do you want this?
Wow, no way.
Like a scale blueprint.
It was a scale,
Yeah.
exactly. It was like a little miniature clinic.
That's
And
awesome.
so we created that and we said, okay, now we have our picture of what we want. Now where do we go? Then we had to locate and find. And that worked out okay. And then we built the clinic inside, and then that's where we started. And I promised the kids that, and that was part of my work ethic because I worked 24/7.
Right. Yeah.
It didn't matter if somebody called and they called Saturday, we'd pick up all the messages and I'd get them in on Sunday night, Sunday morning, Saturday afternoon. It didn't matter. And because again, I hate failing because it's not cool. And so, I said, I'm not going to fail in this state because the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Darcy too. So, because she wasn't working at the time. Because when we came back from the States, it's when 1994. And that's when all the hospitals were tentative on whether we were going to keep 3 hospitals or 2 hospitals or whatever at that time, or we were going to shut one down. And so Darcy couldn't get any lab tech work. So I worked a lot in the previous clinic, and then I just upped the ante for the new one. And we started out with a pretty big bang.
Yeah.
I had a bit of a clientele, and so they followed me, and we went to work. Yeah, that was the clinic start.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's where it all began.
that's where it all began.
Did you go right to your current location where you're at now?
Correct.
Okay, so you've been there since the
Yeah.
get-go.
So
yeah.
22 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we started there. Yeah. They had the clinic up and running in a couple months. And I remember I worked. Oh yeah, that was funny. I worked out of my house.
Oh yeah.
And so we had the front room set up as a clinic. And then that was the time we thought we'd go electronic instead of paper. Well, neither Darcy and I are electronic whizzes, so that was interesting. So it was, I remember I still have the patient today, but he came in and treated him. I said, okay, do you want some water? Darcy, go down onto our new electronic computer system and print out a receipt. We've been practicing it, right? And so we were sitting up at the front table, and she wasn't coming up. I said, told my patient, I said, give me 1 minute. Went downstairs. We had a 4-level split. Went down to the office we had set up down there. There's Darcy on the floor crying. My 1.5-year-old son pulled his diaper off that had shit on it, and there was shit everywhere. The computer was blacked out because she thought she lost the entire program.
Oh.
And she says, I cannot do this. And so we had to clean up. We had to organize things. The patient was fantastic. He was just laughing.
Yeah.
Everything came back, fixed up everything. Computer didn't lose anything. We just had to reset. And then we had to restart. And so that's how we started out of our house.
Wow.
And then eventually moved to the office we're at. And our front desk was nothing more than a card table.
Oh, wow.
And we worked off of that for a while until the front desk came in. And then we just started. Yeah.
A very inspirational story.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a good memory.
Yeah.
But I think when I look at, for me and that history that you now know of me, That obviously has led to where I am now.
Mhm.
Like it's when you retrospect 2020, this all makes sense. A little bit and why I worked the way to do, how many hours I put in, et cetera, in order to establish where we're going to go. And patient comes in. Yeah. You know what? I'm not giving up. So if it doesn't work, it means I didn't quit.
Yeah.
Patient might have.
Yeah.
So I'm not quitting.
Yeah.
It's just no. This is just not even in the book. It's not in the dictionary. You just keep moving forward to get where you need to get to. Sound like David Goggins.
I'm getting inspired. I don't know about you.
I think you're
This is great.
I would still say you're a little less extreme compared to David
little
Goggins.
less. I need to drop a few F-bombs.
Yeah. So, say something like "stay hard."
Who's gonna carry the boats and the logs?
Show up.
Guy.
Yeah.
Honestly, those show up. That's it's interesting listening to you speak to, and it almost sounds like somewhere in there, Blaine, you were in this horrible accident, but at the same time, like it sounds like to me, if you could change your history, you wouldn't remove the accident from your life.
Can't.
Yeah.
No.
You wouldn't be the same person.
No.
Yeah.
Well, Darcy and I, one of the things when we go out on a date is I'll say, okay, what in your history would you change? So it's an interesting question posed when you first think about it, but then, you may not be able to change anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because I like where I am right now.
Yeah, you're where you are because of who you who you are, and who you are is because of what happened.
So any stupid things I did back when I was young, I can't change them.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have ended up where I am today.
Yep.
As we go through there. So yeah, I think that's that whole story has shaped my entire philosophy, which again, which is why working sometimes with Blaine is a little hard because there's just not a second step. It's first step. Open the door, get going. Yeah. Never had a sick day at all in my life from work. So vacations are horrible. I'll get sick like you wouldn't believe on vacations.
Yeah, your immune system just crashes.
Down regulate and whack.
Yeah.
Yep.
The tiniest, weakest little virus comes in and just smokes me.
It's funny when I was like working at the clinic there with Blaine on placement.
Yeah.
Blaine like was going through his day or whatever, and he was like talking about when he got up. It was like 4 a.m. or something like that day. And Blaine looks at me, he goes, "Don't be like me when you're older."
Yeah.
And then I think a couple of your patients even said the same thing to me. Yeah.
Don't end up that way.
Don't do what Blaine's doing. And I was like, all right. Like, okay.
There's got to be a better way. Maybe a little easier.
Yeah. I mean, like, we can learn from those who came before us kind of thing, right?
Oh, for sure.
There's some balance, I think, to be struck everywhere. But it's like trying to find balance in anything in life is hard.
Well, I think people at the clinic, hopefully, this is in my heart, is that the push that I do, it's like working for a really hardcore coach.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want the hardcore coach. I want the guy that's going to push me to that next level. I don't want to work with the coach that, is showing up, but really is just getting there. He's getting a paycheck, etc. And I see that over and over and over again when I'm on vacation, going to gyms, I'm watching some of these trainers. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Anyways, I want to work for the guy that is pushing their athletes the hardest. I want people to work for me because I'm going to push you to that next level. And you get to a certain level and then you've made it. But I can do it in a shorter period of time for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. I can minimize the mistakes that I've made. So, don't do that. Go there.
Yeah.
Okay. But why did you go there now? Now you have to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now the learning curve is there. It's not just spoon feeding.
Yep.
So here's the learning curve. Here's where you want to get to. How quickly can you get there? And I'll push you for about 4 or 5 years. And then from there, the student becomes the teacher.
Right.
Yeah.
It's we can talk all day about coaching, like and stuff like that too, because we do it as well, and it's so interesting too, and I get a lot of joy out of it because like humans are complex, like puzzles, right? And it's dynamic and it's changing and it's shifting, and what worked one week for one person might not work for another, or even for that same person another week, right? And trying to navigate all that is just such a awesome experience, and it's like it's pushing, but also knowing when to like pull back and then to show empathy, but also to be. It's like empathy and pushing someone aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. They can coexist. And, you can be the person that can listen to someone's trials and tribulations and then offer, advice and be the voice of reason, but also still, validate the individual human experience too.
I feel like we should be married.
Yeah, maybe, Blaine. We have a lot of the same philosophies. I think I kind of figured that out when
Yeah.
over at Mackie.
Well, that's who you gravitate
definitely.
towards, right? Like when you're actually
Yeah.
doing stuff, you gravitate towards those people that have similar philosophies and ideas.
Yeah.
And that's good that you wrap yourself around those people because that continues to drive the engine.
It's why I wound up like working with Bridge City Barbell. It's like why I wound up
totally
having Danny coach me too at one point.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, it just kind of perpetuates itself. Like you kind of find like-minded individuals, and like truthfully, like I've had like shitty coaches in my lifetime. I've been to really shitty physiotherapy clinics as well, and it's just when you find it, you kind of know. You know what I mean? Like you find those kinds of people that you're like, oh, like this person like actually cares. You know what I mean? And I think that is the big thing that set at least your clinic apart from the other ones like I've experienced in the past too.
Well, it's something we call it finding home.
Mm.
You kind of settle into home because you're comfortable at home.
Yep.
And you don't have to be somebody else.
Yeah.
You can be you.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I think that's pretty important. I think that's what we tried to drive with the clinic. Number, we don't give up. Number two is bring us the hard stuff.
Yeah.
But it won't be easy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll make you work your ass off to get what you need to get.
That's definitely a misconception about physiotherapy is it's not a pill, man. And it takes like active buy-in from the person, right?
Yeah.
And like you guys don't typically just do like, yeah, come in, I'll give you a little bit of this, I'll crack your back and on your way you go kind of thing. There's a lot more involvement from both you and the person coming in, right?
Yeah, usually what I do now, and it's kind of probably in the last 5-6 years, because I'm still morphing.
Mm-hmm.
I still want to morph into something better. It's just the doors are getting less. As you're a student, there's a lot of doors to open. As I'm getting near the end of my career, there's less doors, but I know they're still out there and I still want to expose them.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to make every patient that I work with a physio.
Right.
Okay, analyze yourself. Analyze what you're doing, assess it, do something, reassess. What'd that do? How'd you respond to that? Because if they can do that, then that's easier for me to kind of fit all the puzzle pieces together to make the picture.
And they don't need you necessarily long term then.
Correct.
They can self-manage, right?
Exactly. Find what tools work, find what tools don't.
Yeah. And
super important. However, having said that, with the trend of physio and the whole, I guess, controversy that is out there, it's not new. I didn't bring it up, is that manual therapy versus don't touch.
Yeah.
And the exercise and that sort of stuff. In my head, why don't we use everything we can in order to promote that direction? And in our clinic, the manual therapy and restoring the proper mechanics and physics of the body is part of that trend. But lifting is also part of that trend. Is one outweigh the other? Not necessarily, but I think you do need both.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not on the bandwagon of let's just have them come in and do a superficial range of motion assessment and here's a few exercises where you go.
Yeah.
I have enough problems getting people to do their home exercises, even with the manual therapy solidification of what's wrong with them.
Yeah.
Not let alone just of something superficial. So yeah, we're gonna the clinic, as far as my philosophy, and as long as I own it, it'll always have that base.
Yep.
To develop and build on that. I think it's super important.
I would love to jump back to that point where you said that we'll get into it about the whole you leaving another clinic because the philosophies of physio were kind of morphing and changing. Something I learned recently actually was from Richard Barassa actually, that at one point in time physios couldn't prescribe exercise without the prescription without the okay from the doctor. Which I didn't know that was real. And that's crazy to me because they have quite little training on that aspect. And physios, don't get me wrong, it's better now, but I can't imagine you guys had very much training on that either back when you were in school. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're shaking your head. Yeah.
That's right.
So I would love to kind of jump back to that point and then we can wade our way through kind of the manual therapy, even philosophies and things like that.
Sure.
So like, I guess what did you see that was changing that made you kind of want to go chase your own thing? Simple question. I'm giving you all the simple ones today.
Simple. I think a couple things. One, I think at that time, functional rehab was taking a first place at the table of rehab. Since that time, I'm not, and this is just my little boy, I don't like functional as a term.
That word stresses me out. When you say it, like it's a trigger for me. It's just like,
because it's supposed to have some tidy box and be the end all and be all to lifting, like correctional exercises.
yeah, also a big buzzword.
I
Yeah.
don't even know what that means
neither,
when
yeah.
it comes to understanding it. So I think that term and the way I started in that physio is that that was the end all and be all. Like if you didn't have them in functional, you weren't actually doing physio. I just couldn't grasp it because I couldn't. And the way it's defined now is a box lift.
Yeah, it's like the best way to move, right? There's one way to do it.
So I really struggled with that, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. And I played the game because that was my job, but it just wasn't working for me. And so there's always a little knot in my stomach thinking, okay, this isn't what I want to do with myself and my patients. So that was one. And I think in some weird and wild way, I thought that the old boys club in town was affecting how we trained and treated. By that, I mean, relationship building was pretty important. I didn't care. Which is why even today, our clinic isn't affiliated with anything or anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want people to work with us or have a handshake agreement with me about referrals, where those go, how they get there. I don't give a shit.
Mm-hmm.
Just let me do my treatment and let that speak for itself.
Yeah.
So then that person goes out and tells their doctor. I actually, when I started the clinic, I actually went to a couple of doctors and tried to sell myself, I guess. It was the most horrible experience that I could have experienced as a professional because I'm sitting there trying to say how good I am. Can you refer to me? Hated it. Last time I ever did it. Ever. And that was 20 some years ago. And I'm not doing that again. I went home and talked to Darcy. I said, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So we just based it on, okay, bring me a hard patient. Let me treat them, and then let them be the word of the clinic.
Mm-hmm.
So we've always based everything on word of mouth. Obviously, I'm on social media now because of the new world, and we're actually bigger, so we need a little bit more exposure. But I treat and I teach everybody in our clinic, WOM, word of mouth, is by far the most organic, whatever that means, and the best way to keep your name out and helping people more than anything else, because it never goes away. It's always there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The Instagram, it comes and goes, but that word of mouth is always there. So flipping back, I guess, to the fact that's why I left is I wasn't about relationships. I wasn't about functional. I created this manual therapy, biophysics, whatever term you want to put to it, that establishes the proper mechanics. What does proper mean? I don't know. I'll find out when I'm digging into somebody's back. Assess them, treat them, reassess them. How do you move? Is it pain-free? Is it painful? Do you move better now? Does it feel better? Do you feel stiff? Whatever. So that's how we based everything. And honestly, at the beginning, I didn't have to buy anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't have to buy ultrasounds or lasers or anything else.
$3,000, $4,000, $10,000 machine.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was cheap little Scottish farm boy. So that, so we just started off manual therapy and I just settled in. And so that's the transition from the older kind of style clinic or my previous clinic to where I am now.
There's, sorry to interrupt there, Blaine. There's something about the whole world of kind of manual therapy and stuff that even my philosophy is like I have ping ponged on it like quite a bit just from when I started physio school. Cause I got a bit of the experience of like, I mean, it really does depend on what you describe as manual therapy. If you were to define it, I would say it's usually some sort of therapy being performed with your own two hands, right? Some people might factor in like things that you do to a person with your own hands as manual therapy, like needling or something like that, right? But I think like I remember reading, research and it was like, oh, like it, doesn't really work on this one hand of things. And I'm reading it. I'm like, okay, like I guess maybe not, but I'm like, exercise is still really important too. And then I kind of read some other stuff and I'd be like, people would talk about kind of therapeutic touch and how that can be like really helpful.
Mhm.
And don't get me wrong, not to everyone, but like you also don't apply the same treatment principles to everyone because that'd be silly. The same way you don't program the same thing for everyone in an
Right.
exercise program. It's
Right.
supposed to be individualized care, right?
Yeah.
And so going kind of back and forth on that over the years and reading a bit of this and a bit of that, and then going to your clinic and having experienced like crappy clinics and stuff too. And the overall experience of it is that, I mean, everyone can argue to the moon and back about what physiological thing is or is not happening to the body. But at the end of the day, if someone is so scared to move something and you can instill confidence in them to move that thing, for example, like your back or something, and you can give them even like a short-term relief for pain to get them moving and back to living their life again and getting back to doing the things they want to do, or even to exercise to improve their, quotes like function. That's I think where, I mean, we talked a bit about this too on placement, but like I think that's where the magic really really sits in it. And honestly, it's not magic. It's just being a good person, being an empathetic ear, talking, building relationships with the client, and working to get them to a place that is that they're better off, right? And they don't necessarily have this fear of movement anymore. And the whole functional craze and corrective exercise craze, it produced more barriers, I think, in the world of physiotherapy and exercise, and that instead of taking them down. And our society doesn't move enough as is. We don't need more barriers. And so if someone is even having trouble moving in the first place, why would we not want to try and dismantle those barriers in any way, shape, or form we could? And I think manual therapy is a part of that. And then I got to experience it at your clinic as well, and even get to use it myself and see how, we had one patient together without going into too many details because that's illegal. So someone being so scared to move their arm. And then a few weeks into this process, because of some fractures and stuff and surgery and yada, yada,
Mhm.
all of a sudden them reporting to me that, yeah, I'm reaching for things on a shelf again. I wasn't doing that before. Right. And it was like, okay, like, so, and often what I would do for this treatment that Blaine said, like, this is what we should do for this person
Yeah.
is I would move their arm essentially for them to help kind of restore that range of motion, help them desensitize to this extremely painful, scary thing. And then I would go to the gym with them and we would lift. We would do, dumbbell exercises, lateral raises, lat pull downs, the whole shebang. Like I would train them almost not like quite like a bodybuilder, but that's functional exercise.
Mhm.
I got to get this person back to function. And it's your podcast, so I'm going to shut up here real quick and pitch it back to you. But when we're going through the world of neuro rehab, for some reason they have this like, you just do what you can with the person, like, because you just do what they can do. It's about them, right? But for some reason, the world of like musculoskeletal therapy, we all of a sudden put these barriers up where like, oh man, if you can't pick that up with your back at like completely neutral, then you shouldn't pick that up at all or whatever. But you don't know what kind of barriers that person has. But for some reason, if someone's had some sort of neurological condition, it's all of a sudden different. Instead of thinking like, no, the human body can adapt to a variety of postures and lifting positions. And what's functional should be individual instead of this blanket statement of the optimal way to move because of joint forces and stuff, right? Because sometimes people don't, the people aren't the same. They're complicated. But yeah, I don't know if you want to throw something on there.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think the philosophy that we have is a way. It's not the way.
I love that. Yeah.
So it's not something that everybody should take and you get a PhD in the Mackie manual therapy. It's not what it is. It's just how I've chosen to do it in order to create what you just said, like getting people to move as best they can.
Yeah.
Just like you can see people deadlift with a flex back and they do fine. They'll deadlift me and you go, oh my God, they're going to break their back. Well, no, they've adapted to that. That seems to work for them.
Yep.
It may not be how I would start a brand new lifter.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's about experimenting, I think, is a really good term. And sometimes it's seen as a fragile term because, oh, you shouldn't experiment. You should use evidence-based practice. Well, that's where I get my evidence.
Yeah.
I'm going to attempt this. How does that respond? What do you do with that? How did they move with that? How did they change or adapt to that? And then, oh, the experiment didn't work. Okay, so why? So you have to analyze and then come back around to it and do it again with maybe a different flex in what you're doing.
Yep.
And I think that's good. I think one of the biggest things that I try to teach all of my therapists is get your base in your manual therapy techniques, but please keep thinking. And the word that keeps popping into my head right now is passion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you have a passion for what you're doing? Because if you do, it's not work anymore. Okay. It's just you're there, you're experimenting, you're learning. And so some of my newer therapists are learning how to not even follow the path that they learned in school.
Yeah.
Because you can deviate from that and get from point A to point B a little quicker, but also learn, oh, that's what happened. So why not experiment with what they do, the patient's doing or the athlete's doing, and see what the response is?
Mm-hmm.
That's the most wonderful thing to say, oh, geez, that actually got you better. I didn't think about that.
Yep.
Oh, now it's exposing a whole new world of biophysics and biomechanics and all that sort of stuff, or training philosophies and seeing how they train. And we talked about that at the beginning. Like you said, it was such a neat thing to train somebody and try and figure that organism out. From the neuro to the psychology to the physics to the muscle to whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And once you start figuring that out and you start checking off some boxes, they start making these big gains. And guess what? What a wonderful connection.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, we're all in the people business. And, you know, when you're working with someone and you take the whole person like into account and you don't just look at an arm, right? You're looking like at a mother who needs to cook and clean and and go to work and all these kinds of things, right? It's more than just, you know, doing like focusing on one specific thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? And even like with like our powerlifting clients and stuff, if you, in the whole scientific process that you're just outlining, if you're going to try something with someone and it doesn't work and you're just going to keep trying it because some book said so or some lecturer said so, that's just, that flies in the face of the scientific of principles, right?
Yeah.
Like it's clearly not working. And that, you know, you do it enough times, that's technically like the definition of insanity.
Yep.
Right? You're doing something that won't work and you're just going to keep doing it. Like that's just stupid. But you know, it's like when we started programming and lifting, we thought like, oh, okay, you want to get bigger, 8 to 12 reps is what we have to do. And then like, oh, you want to get stronger, 5 to 6 or 6 and below reps is what you have to do. Also, like what happened to rep 7, by the way? We just skip that number all the time.
I'll be honest, like when I started, it was very much like block periodization. You know, you start hypertrophy, 8 to 12. And I would never program 7. Like sets of 7 was never even a thought. Because the next one was like 6 to 4.
Yep.
And then 3 to 1
for peaking.
Strength, And I would totally never do a set of 7.
It's like no 13th floor on the elevator.
That's right. Yeah. It's like,
honestly.
It's like, why? It's superstition, I guess. But I
think it still comes back to the fact that most of the population, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the population loves a program.
Mm-hmm.
They're sold a dime a dozen.
They just want to have the blinders on and do the work and not think about it, like we talked about before.
Yes. Yeah, and a lot of people come in and say, I don't want to think.
Yeah.
I just want to go in and do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, why CrossFit has been quite successful.
Very much.
Just go in and do.
And then at the start of CrossFit, though, a lot of people were getting hurt because they didn't know how to coach it. So it's changed a lot since then. I'm not shitting on CrossFit. And again, it's a way to get people moving. Yeah. And honestly, Olympic lifting and powerlifting both benefited off the surge of CrossFit because it introduced tons of people to barbells.
Yeah.
Which is amazing, right?
The difficulty that arises in a lot of the programs that are set up that way is people are still trying to make a living.
Yes.
So to make a living, you need volume. Mm-hmm. So you put a class of 30 together. It makes more sense from a business perspective, not necessarily as a coaching perspective.
Yeah.
And so those get mixed badly.
That brings up a really good point I wanted to ask you too, because so like there's powerlifting coaches that will pack their schedule so tight that you almost sacrifice like athlete care, like like the amount of time each athlete gets, right?
Yep.
And there are physio clinics that do the same thing. I think it exists pretty much anywhere, like where money exists, and there's a fee for service kind of thing, right? Like I know what happens in dentistry, and I know that there's other fields as well. And so I was going to ask you a little bit about the philosophy of like, how do you find the balance to make sure your doors can stay open? Because if your doors don't stay open, you can't provide the care at all. There's no care being provided. But also like making sure each person gets sufficient time and the care that they deserve and the care that you want to provide, right? Because there's the world of we call them physio mill clinics, right, where you have 3 patients per 1 hour time slot. Danny didn't know that existed, by the way, because he's been so spoiled by your guys' clinic.
Yeah, like when Adrian was here, was it Adrian?
Yeah,
when he was explaining was it you explaining it?
The physio mill philosophy.
Yeah, I've been like so blessed and pampered by your guys' like services. I had no idea that there was like a physio mill where a physio would have like 3-4 patients at a time. And I was like, no way. And then if that ever happened at your guys' place and I was with like, a couple other patients, like, what the hell's going on here? Like, give me my time, And I was just so flabbergasted from the whole thing.
Yeah, it's
crazy.
It's interesting because the business side does become conflicting or dominant just about sometimes. I know if you work your way west or east, because I've taught in those clinics, and it's $4 an hour, and you can put somebody on some ice or heat or whatever, and then. But it's interesting. Oh yeah, this brings up another. But they also call themselves a manual therapist again because it's a buzzword, and the buzzword is sellable. It's marketable, and that's where it comes back to the research. It doesn't work. I'm going to be a bit of an asshole and say, well, who's the manual therapist doing the manual therapy?
Did you talk to the person at all too?
Yeah. So I'm a little confused because there's good lifters and there's not so good lifters. There's good coaches. There's not so good coaches. There's good manual therapists and maybe people that their hands just aren't as sensitive to. So I think we have to be careful on who's doing that research. But then flipping back to the mills, I've taught in the places that in our front office, we have 4 rooms. And in that same space, I've taught in places that have 12 rooms in the same space. Okay, so
or just curtains.
It's curtains, yeah. It's curtains because they're less they're less costly, and et cetera, et cetera. But again, they've got all the extra stuff there. But until somebody experiences the 2 different styles, you don't know, Danny. You don't know the other styles, so you don't know that there's a black because you haven't experienced the white.
Yeah.
So the physio mills are out there. And again, I don't, it's just the way they've created their philosophies and business wise, honestly, they make more than me because I'm not about this for the money, which is why I work long hours.
Yeah.
Because in order to make ends meet on the kind of the 2 every hour, then that's what you had to do. So it is different.
Yeah.
And I don't know where we're going with that after that.
It's kind of like, how do you decide on where to find because it is a balance there as well. Like, how do you decide on where to find that balance, right? Before, like, you don't want to sacrifice the care, but the money makes the world go round at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. Well, you have to pay the bills, and my philosophy came first before the money.
Yeah.
And it does every time. So it's always a matter of, okay, can I do good therapy with my hands in that 15 to 20? And I knew intuitively in my head, I didn't have to practice it. I knew intuitively that, okay, if I talk to you, Danny, for 3, 4, 5 minutes to find out about you a little bit or about how you responded to last treatment, that 20 now became 15.
Yeah.
Okay, now I need to get you into shorts. That became 12. Okay, now I have 12 minutes, and that doesn't include the exiting questions.
Yeah.
or getting off the table to reassess. So now my therapy, what was 20 minutes that you paid for, is actually 50% of that, 60% of that. So we looked at the half hour, which was better for me because in that first few minutes I can get in. So I can get a boat. And if I know you, you're going to get 28, 29, 30 minutes.
For sure.
If I don't know you, you'll get a little less, but then that includes, that's an assessment process, et cetera. So the half hour is where we stuck, and that's where we would be for the rest of my life. And then how does that counter into business? We just don't make as much.
Yep.
At the end of the day, I just don't make as much. So I work longer hours.
But it's a sacrifice you're willing to make.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. I'll rather sacrifice that than go into a patient mill. And we also talked about too, is that my patients brought this up with me. He said, yes, so you're not commissioned. No, I'm not commissioned. Good. Well, why you say good is because we've been at clinics that are commissioned. And what's happening is we seem to be rushed.
Oh yeah.
Through, like, because if I can put 3 of you through for one of the hours, even though we're treating half hours, but I can squeak another one in there on commission, my pay just went way up.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's going to drive a lot of decision making.
Mm-hmm.
I won't say the person, but the decision making.
Yeah.
If the opportunity arises, the decision might occur that, I can get you in.
Yeah.
So I just took that out of the game.
Yep. Yeah.
It's just out of the game. So, but we need some way to manage that, because if somebody's on commission, if you don't work, you don't get paid.
Yes.
Well, in my clinic, it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, I have to measure something to make sure that you're working hard enough with a guaranteed wage that there's a wage modification or change at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So I've got a whole program set up with how we manage that. And this is the levels that you have to achieve in order to make that. Because you can't work 50%, still get a full wage, and then expect, I'm doing a really good job. I want a couple dollars more.
That makes sense.
No, I can't do that because you weren't efficient during here. Yeah. So you have to capture it some way.
Yeah.
I just don't want people coming into the clinic thinking I'm not getting paid because of the commission. I don't want that to be an issue. So if there's an hour or two off, what do I expect? Well, do some patient care work on the files, study, read, come with me, like do anything to make yourself professionally, independently in your own right or for helping the clinic and get better.
Mm-hmm.
So I want that stress gone. But at the end of the year, if you haven't done enough and you know where you be, then you need to buck up or it doesn't work.
Yep.
So if somebody doesn't get a raise, one of the things I don't like in anybody that's around me in my life is the victimization.
Right. Yeah.
Well, no, I couldn't do it because.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't get out of bed when I was 16. So where do you want to go with that?
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's something like we talk about all the time too, with like our coaching fees and stuff. Because we want people like to get the most out of their time with us and stuff. But then you're looking at how much can we kind of pay ourselves, but also try and, get that person the best, programming and coaching and stuff that they need, right?
Yep.
And we do online coaching, so end of the day, it is not for everyone, right? Some people want that or need that in-person experience, which is usually a bit more of a premium, right?
Mm-hmm.
Costs a bit more and whatnot.
And it should.
Yeah, I agree, 100% agree, right? And then so, we're always kind of talking back and forth, and you're also factoring things like, okay, inflation's going up by this much, but wages typically aren't matching this. So it's how much can you really move the goalpost, right? Mm-hmm. Before you start just bleeding, right? And it's interesting seeing that side of things because, I think where money can exist, corruption can exist, right? Oh. Obviously, right? But so it's definitely an ongoing discussion at Bridge City Barbell too, and with Dean and Danny's father-in-law there and whatnot. We're always kind of talking about those kinds of things because we want to be able to do the job, so we need to get paid. But if we don't get paid, then we can't even do the job at all, right?
Welcome that there is no balance in life.
Yeah.
People ask me about work-life balance. There's not one.
Yeah.
It just depends where you want to go with it. I said there's always a rebalance. So take some time, get your energy cells back up, and then you're back in the game.
Yeah.
But I also think that people that are looking for life-work balance, it may not be good in private practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You just have to be careful about your choices there, because if you want to be successful, Yeah, there's some hardcore work to be done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
There's I think there's like a big learning gap too I guess when you enter any profession, which is like a
Yep.
big cognitive, psychological, mental load as
Yep.
well.
Yeah.
But I think you can also adapt because I know when I
Yeah.
started coaching, it was very long and arduous, like work. I didn't even have like a spreadsheet system yet. I didn't know. So it's not even about like the programming principles, but like, how do I take this and give it to you? And then you're going to execute it and give it back to me. And somewhere in there has to be some sort of communication. But I also need to prove to you that what you did over time is working.
yes.
Right at the same time. Like you need to know that what you're doing is it's worthwhile, right? And like you're getting something out of it, just aside from, a certain metrics and things like that. So like there's always like a startup cost, if you will, right?
Yeah. Time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. I think even in private practice, even if like a new grad comes to work with me, and I love working with new grads because I can mold them.
Mm-hmm.
But with my style, not necessarily is it the right style, but I think
It's a way.
It's a way.
style.
That's right. Not
Yeah.
the way. It's a way. Depends what time you get talking to me about that.
Yeah.
But I think, I think that startup is always going to be a bit of a drain, and I would call it just about a shock
Mm-hmm.
because I do expect quite a bit. And again, the hard coach.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think in that case, I think people have to be prepared that startup, or if you're coming from school and going into private practice, it's a big step.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big step.
Yep. Humans are complicated,
Humans are complicated.
right?
Psychologically.
That's the thing is like when at your clinic, right? Like I have a pretty good, strong background in exercise principles and programming, but
Exactly.
then you mix in like complexities of like, well, personalities and like injuries and pain
Yep.
and preconceived notions and beliefs and things like that. It's like, holy shit. Where do I start?
Yeah.
Right?
But which makes it also exciting
Yes, I agree.
because there's not a climb the hill. I made it to the top. I did it.
This is always how it's going to be.
Then I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I hate the done.
Yeah.
I can't, I don't manage that well.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the next hill?
Yeah.
What's the next mountain? So one patient is different than the other, even 30 some plus years later. I always love getting a new challenging patient. I just have more tools in my box
Right.
to actually navigate through that,
Yeah.
Mm.
as opposed to going, okay, what the hell? This person paid me, but they don't want to do anything.
Mm,
Okay, what do I do with that?
yeah.
Here's about 5 tools that I will give you that you can start checking off that and try it.
Yep.
And just seize. Oh, Blaine, that didn't work well. Okay, so what are you going to do? What's your next step?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you like? How are you going to navigate or problem solve through this? Because it is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then you actually, it's quite interesting. It's quite in depth because you actually look at the complexities of the human in front of you, but then you have to deal with your own complexities and your own ideology.
Yep.
And try not to make that the rules.
Yep.
Because if you have rules, you may get caught.
Yeah.
Because I don't think everybody runs by the same rules that everybody else does.
No, we're all
Like,
different.
Yeah,
Right.
philosophically, thought processes. There's just so many different variables. And again, that's why there's no end to the climb.
Yeah.
And that's why I love this job. Every day is just another problem,
Mm-hmm.
which reflects into the business side too. Every day as an entrepreneur is just another problem that you have to solve.
Yep.
There'd be some days it'd be nice if there wasn't as many problems, but that's just part of the game.
All
Yeah,
puzzle
it's good.
solving.
All
Yeah,
puzzle solving as you go through.
I like it.
So
I was gonna say too, like when you're trying to come up with like solutions and stuff too, it's difficult sometimes to even know like where to go. I guess it doesn't really matter what kind of problem it is, like whether it's physio related, business related, programming related. Where like what do you have any advice for people like trying to solve issues? Like what's your go-to strategy? Do you pick other people's minds? Do you go to Google, a bit of both, talk to Darcy? Like what's it look like for you?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I will research. AI has actually helped out a fair bit.
Yeah, me and Danny are big
It's-
users of that.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful, pretty scary.
Yep.
Yeah.
For this old head. Darcy's definitely a huge resource for me. And it's not about, oh, she's got the answer. It's about, okay, let's walk through this. Let's take a look at all the different strategies we have to look at this problem. One of my problems, and I'm still working on it, is knee-jerk reactions.
Mm.
I'm a kind of a fixed guy. So, okay, yeah, do this and you'll be done. Oh shit, that was the wrong thing to give them because that didn't work at all. So now I'm learning to say, no, I'm going to take 2 or 3 days. And sometimes I write out my answers and then reread 2 days later and say, oh, that's not good. And then it takes me a little bit and I go back to my old self where kind of the dumb Blaine growing up thinking, okay, it took me a little while to figure things out and I need to give myself some space and time for that. 2 things happen with that. Number 1 is either I come up with a better answer or number 2, it resolves itself. And so instead of trying to knee-jerk reaction, something that probably you didn't need to do, it just kind of resolves itself, which I'm always interested about. And then the other thing that I think that I've learned, Darcy's taught me this too, is listen. Again, as guys, Blaine specifically, I'm a fix-it person. So somebody comes in with a problem and before they actually are finished telling me the problem, I've already fixed it, or I think I've fixed it.
Yeah.
And that sometimes doesn't go very well.
Yep.
And so I find that, and then it's interesting. I think there was 2 or 3 days that I had some of my female people come in and talk to me, and there was some tears and there was some struggles. So you're dealing with that. And I tried to fix it. It didn't work. I got myself deeper into a problem. And then I go, Darcy, I don't get it. I can't work. I can't do this. She says, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm fixing their problem. No, just listen.
Yep.
What? Just listen. What do you mean? Just listen. So I tried it. I was super awkward, me not saying anything. And yeah, it works out wonderfully.
There's a couple of things like I've been like trying to apply to coaching, and honestly, like in the clinic, with your wife or fiance or girlfriend, like all these relationship things, I think they can all be applied to each other, right? Like when you're a better like husband or partner, I think you can be a better clinician. They all like work together. And something I've been doing lately is even things like asking for permission, because not everyone wants to know the mechanisms behind hypertrophy. Not everyone cares. Some people just want the program. Some people do want more. Some people don't give a shit about the pathoanatomy about their knee. They just want to know what they can do about it, right? And they want that, they want power back for over this thing, right? Or whatever it is, right? They want to feel in control of their squat strength or their knee pain and things like that, right? Which makes perfect sense. So even like things like I'll ask like, is it all right if I explain a little bit more about what's going on here or what I think is potentially going on here? Or here's my hypothesis so far. What do you think about that? And do you have any other ideas or things like that? And even like saying things with my partner, I do this all the time. My fiance, I'll be like, do you want solutions or do you want just a listener right now? Right? Because sometimes depending on someone's emotional state and things like that, if you just launch into solution mode, they're gonna feel like sometimes backed into a corner, and you're gonna actually kind of put a wall in place and not be able to get any further, right? And they might not come back to you as a coach or a clinician.
Yep.
And I remember we talked with Adrian about this, but there's some studies out there on physios. On average, it seems that physios will let the patient speak for about 30 seconds before they interject.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it might even be shorter than that, actually.
Interesting.
It's not a long time. It is definitely less than a minute.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we're given tools to coach and to be physios, and I feel like it's just so instinctual that you want to just get in there and like say something and like, oh, you described this symptom, it could be this, or this isn't happening, let's fix this on your program or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But if you just sit there and listen, that alone can create, I think, progress, right? I know just like talking to a physio for some time, you can make your problems feel like better, right?
Yes.
And then especially if it's more of a conversation, it goes back and forth. I know like I'm not as fast in the clinic yet with certain things, obviously, because I'm a newbie, but just sitting there and listening to someone for an extended, maybe up to even 30 minutes, if in an hour session or whatever, I can get so much out of it that I never thought I would have otherwise been able to. And I've actually been applying it to my powerlifting clients and stuff too, like getting their intuitions and their ideas, because no one's going to know their body and their life experiences better than them. And I'm going to take it at face value, right? You know what I mean? It's like, I can't squat today because my knee pain like was that bad. It's like, well, who am I to tell you that your experience is like not real?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Danny made some faces there. You got something to say?
Well, I found you say like you just let people talk as a paramedic, and like coming to someone who is in distress. I've worked with other paramedics that will they'll get just the basics, which I mean you have to get like the critical stuff, the critical information first, but then they'll just like start talking over the patient. And I find just letting them tell their like giving every single detail that they can puts them a little bit at ease potentially, like depending on the situation. But yeah, that's interesting. I like as a practitioner, just letting them speak their mind, and then like, and I especially find this with like older patients, like elderly.
Mm-hmm.
My God, sometimes they just want to be heard, or they just want to be heard, and like they just go on, and I'm totally fine with it because it almost eases the situation a little bit.
Therapeutic.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if you look at today's society, like one of the things we teach in the clinic, and I'll throw out emails to people, is that make sure today is a big priority is listening. Why? I think because a lot of times in today's society, it's running so quickly, so fast. People are trying to get from point A to point B that nobody wants to hear anybody else's story.
Yeah.
And I think that's really harmful.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to listen and hear just their story, because we do have people come into the clinic and they will sit with me and they'll say, I don't want you to touch me today.
Yep.
And first when that happened, I go, oh my God, I'm not going to make I won't be worth anything to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was worth their just sitting and listening.
Oh yeah.
So you sit for the half hour and listen to them because they don't have anybody else to tell.
Yep.
And that's sad.
Mm-hmm.
It is sad.
So I think it's super important.
So I think it's part of the therapeutic experience too.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
having the clinician listen to you, right?
I do think too that clinician has to be engaged in that listening.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for sure.
Like when I look at you, Danny, or you, Thomas, that you are intent, understanding and listening to my story, as opposed to maybe busy in your mind with something else. The patient will read that. It's like an animal reading your energy.
Yep.
They'll read your energy, and that'll make a big impact on whether they come back or not.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be engaged. But what that does is it takes a lot of energy out of you as a clinician.
It does, yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you might have listened all day, but you listened with intent.
Yep.
Yeah, you're bagged.
Yep.
You are absolutely neurologically, psychologically fatigued at the end of the day because you've taken on a lot of energy, and a lot of that energy might be negative.
Yeah.
Because they've got a negative story.
Yeah.
And so you're absorbing that negative energy. And at the end of the day, you're going, oh, God, I don't even know if I can work out tonight. I haven't done anything.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I can work out.
Yeah.
And so those are big factors.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring the kind of certain things will drain your energy. And then I think there's still experiences too in like healthcare and coaching and stuff where people will say things that really like, I say like fill your cup back up after you've emptied it, certain experiences. And I think in terms of finding balance, like that training for me has like been one of those things that most of the time it fills the cup back up. Right.
That's me. Cause I've felt that fatigue after shifts, and I still go to the gym. I'll try to go no matter what.
Yeah.
And like you said, it does, it rejuvenates me almost.
Yes.
And then being in that, especially the social aspect of it, I think is really good. So
yeah, you have friends?
Some.
Okay. Good.
Most of them are at the gym.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, most of them pay me.
Yeah. I hear you. I think the other thing too, and we talk about coaching is some people are very coachable.
Yep.
And then some people are not as coachable.
Oh man, we've talked at length about this. And we've long discussed how to bridge the gap because we're in the people business, right? But you're also in the business, like that means you're trying to get buy-in. And like things like almost like motivational interviewing, getting people involved and stuff.
Yeah.
It's not just a pill, man. Like it's more. You have to be able to get someone to believe in it. And even that listening component can make someone believe in the program or with the rehab process enough that maybe that's the thing that actually makes it work. Cause like there's certain programs I've made that like looking at it, I'm just like, man, this makes no sense. Like this is never what I like would have started at. But through the process of like iterating over issues and kind of boiling your way down to something that works is sustainable and the person thinks works and believes in it, it can be so much more powerful than just do it because I said so. Right.
Yeah.
I think you get like such a bigger impact out of it. And just like the trust in the clinician, the trust in the coach, those things all contribute to the program. Like it's so much more than just my training and like maybe the manual therapy and the whatever else you implement or the stretching before the lifting. Like it's that experience of the whole thing. The whole thing comes together where you are trusting in this person and they're giving you guidance. And then you know that if it's not working, you can just go back to them, right?
Yeah.
And you don't feel like there's a wall shut off there, right?
Yep.
Because people, like you said, they do feel it.
Yep.
Me and Danny have been talking about this lately because we've had this debate a little bit whether or not you should swear and whatnot. And this paper recently came out by some physiotherapists that said, can swearing be both like client-centered and professional? And, me and Danny were on we do swear. It's like in our vernacular, if you will. But I've also been in situations where I have sworn around somebody and I made the comment, like, you can feel their butthole pucker.
Yeah, you can read it.
You can feel it. They tense up.
Yeah.
And so if that's what my clinician does, when I say something, anything, it could be a swear.
Yeah.
I'm probably like, I'm not going to trust that person as much at that time. You know what I mean? Like it's that first impressions kind of thing. But yeah, like that whole communication aspect is so critical, I think,
100%. It works clinically too in our and I've used this a lot when I'm teaching new grads coming in, is that if there's a guy that comes in and he's from the rigs, if you try and put the pocket protector on and the professional physiotherapist a little above you, you are going to fail right off the get-go because that dog will read that coming in, no respect.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have somebody that is more of a religious background and they've grown up in a very not limited, but
certain values, beliefs. Yeah.
You have to be a bit of a chameleon is what I call it. So that, because if the rigor comes across and you can't develop that relationship or that buy-in, the rehab doesn't work.
Yeah.
And if you're like, oh, gee whiz, mister, that back pain sounds downright terrible.
Right.
But he's over here going, my back fucking hurts so much,
That's
man.
right.
I can't even fucking bend over. And you're going to be like, gee whiz, that sounds bad. There's
And
no
I
way you
appreciate
can trust
if you don't really use those words.
Yeah.
I feel no,
It's like,
No.
you can't do that. You know what I mean?
it won't work.
But like you said, like being a chameleon is like, well, that's a skill.
Yeah.
And
sometimes I think we hear that word and we hear salesman, we hear some of those negative things that goes along with that, but it's not. You're just trying to connect.
Yeah.
Like what's better than somebody coming in and you actually connect with that person because you have something in common? That there's a bit of a bond there that starts out really quick. I don't know how big it is, but there's something. But if you can't connect with that person on any level, it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
they're not gonna believe in it, right?
No, and they're not going to follow what you do then because they don't believe in you.
Yeah.
So there's no connection, which is tough. But again, if somebody can't do that, then that may not be the position for them. Right? That's fine. If they're not able to do that, then your private practice may not work out that well.
Yeah. Even coaching
or coaching,
personal training, like the people facing jobs, like they're not for everyone, man.
Nope.
It's plain and simple, right?
Yeah.
Well, people ask, I was screwed up because at the beginning I thought you just make a hire and then it would just happen. Like everything should just fall into place.
Yeah.
And then I had one person quit on me. You let somebody go. And I go, okay, what the heck's going on here? Then an entrepreneur that I was treating one time told me, he says, Blaine, it took me 25 years. It took me 25 years to find the right group.
Wow.
Yeah, guess what? I'm at 30 some years. I've just now started. The group is tied.
Yeah.
Is really good. But not everybody fits with me.
Yep.
That's fine.
Yeah.
You have to kind of follow my direction.
Yep.
And then go from there.
Yeah, and even I'm still coming to grips with this, but like when I lose like an athlete, I can't help but think like, oh, is it something I did? Was it my communication style? Was there not enough communication? And like, don't get me wrong, there's always things I can improve on, and I do try and use like exit interviews and things like that
For sure.
if they'll allow the time. And
Yeah.
you usually haven't done like something egregious or whatever, right? Or like ignored someone for weeks on end, and I don't really do that, but usually like. End of the day, some things just come down to like you were not the right person. It's a clash of personalities or something like that, right?
What's dating?
Yeah, it is.
Right?
It is
Not
like
every
dating.
date is going to end up in a marriage.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
So you have to figure out what strings you're going to pull in order to either keep that date going, or it's best to say, you know what? It's not going to work.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like, yeah, man, like you're right. Like maybe you would be better served by another
And you know
other
what? That's
coach.
okay though.
That's okay. Absolutely.
That's what we have to get to. It's okay because it's not working out.
Yeah.
That's
And
right.
it's not necessarily failure, even though like I view it, it feels like in the moment, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, like I screwed up or something.
Yeah.
Or like,
I'm very much the same way.
yeah, because you've lost athletes over the years.
course.
I've lost athletes, over the years. And it's just, it is a part of it. It just, you're not everyone you're going to gel with, right?
Well, again, it comes down to that complexity of the human.
Mm.
Yeah.
Like there's so many varieties. It's like crazy, but not all the varieties fit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine.
They can't.
Nope.
Right. And I think that's part of the learning process as well.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
100%. I think when it comes to the coaching side of us, I think I've learned most from my kids because each of the kids, as they grew up, was a different coaching environment. And then for my two daughters, Jordan and Kaylee, they went through it, but I don't think I was very good at that time.
Mhm.
And then Luke got the benefit of the errors I made before that I was able to correct.
Mm-hmm.
But then Luke is like extremely coachable. And now he's becoming the teacher.
Mm.
And the guy's just a monster now. And he's got nothing to go but up at 22 years old.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun watching that and watching his development, not just with, oh, he's strong. No, it's the discipline. When do you get up? What do you eat? When are you eating your protein? How many grams are you getting in today?
Yeah.
Like he's doing all this to me
Yeah.
now. And so it's been very nice to see that. And boy, that comes full circle back to what the gym provides us outside and beyond. I'm lifting weights,
Yeah.
but just all those other growth variables that we have. And Luke is starting to show each and every one of those. I'm going, okay, good. We did okay. Because we'll know he'll be good now as he goes forward.
Yeah.
Not just because he's strong, but just because he can apply a lot of those other skills to everything.
For sure.
It snowballs.
Exactly. And that's, boy, you start looking at the society today, you're like, geez, I wish every kid could be in the gym.
Yeah. I know. And it's not, and I guess, it isn't for everyone, but
Nope.
there's so many like trickle down effects from it. We've talked about like, the fitness snowball almost, but like,
Yeah.
so you go to the gym and you're trying to usually you wind up there for self-betterment, whatever that looks like. Everyone's there for essentially the same reason, self-betterment, whether it's like vanity purposes or strength. It's all like a form of self-betterment, right?
Yeah.
or you're trying to stop getting bullied or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You had to bring that up again, didn't you?
Yeah.
So just thanks.
But like, a lot of people have a similar story of why they went to the gym in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Or found martial arts and things like that.
Yeah.
Like, it's because like I didn't like where I was at and I wanted something different. And the iron gives you a place to go for that, right? And it's also like, I don't know, it's also simultaneously a safe place where the bar always weighs the same. And it gives you that consistency in a world where it's seldom, consistent and predictable, right? And then on the other end of things too, like it forces you to time manage. And then all of a sudden you start caring about what happens in the gym. So you go, man, 5 hours of sleep, it's not cutting it. I feel horrible. I can't go to the gym after it. I don't like it. So then, someone starts sleeping better. And then they go, I had a lot of food today and I felt really good. And I've been having a lot of protein lately and I'm getting bigger, getting stronger, and like all these things kind of like start coming together and they start looking different too. And all of a sudden you're walking differently, not because of, any changes to your gait pattern or whatever. It's because you feel different about yourself. Right?
One thing I notice with, I think the population in general right now is that it's a big statement, but I think a lot of people lack identity.
Mm,
And I think the gym offers a huge identity.
yes.
And we've seen this in some of our strength classes where kids will come in, they're a little on the lean side for their size or for their age and maybe not doing so well in school, that sort of stuff. And maybe gym class is more of a torture
Yeah.
than it is enjoyment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we had one individual, he was younger in his teens and he started a strength class with Matt Palmer and his strength started going way up. And then I treat his mom and his mom says, you know what, Blaine? We're so excited because he's now beating the hockey players in the strength and conditioning component of phys ed.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I go, so good.
Mm-hmm.
And so now all of a sudden you see this kid starting to blossom. His identity is associated with we'll call it a strength component, but his identity is starting to give him confidence.
Yeah.
And wow, is that very powerful? So I looked at that and I thought, yeah, this gym thing's pretty cool, because if kids can get an identity, I'm a power lifter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care who says that. You don't need to compete at Westerns or whatever.
Yeah.
You're doing some lifts, so you're powerlifting if you want to look at that as a label. Fantastic. But that identity, I think, is very critical, because I think nowadays the kids that are lost, they don't know where to fit.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that's a problem.
I mean, like to have like a high school kid, you know, like what that does to someone when you go, I'm beating all the athletes now in the strength, like the strength components and stuff, right? It's like,
you know what he has to feel inside? So much better.
Unbeatable.
Yeah.
You have to feel
Sure.
unbeatable. And then that builds on other things. And like,
Oh, for sure.
you start going, if I work hard and I'm actually, you know, if I'm consistent,
Yes.
I can, things happen. Like I accomplished things. I couldn't squat 315 before, but I did it now, right? I just kept trying. And then it's like, builds up this belief that like, okay, you can get things done if you just stay consistent with it too, right?
Keep opening the door.
Yeah, which like we talked about before recording, it was like showing up as, you know, half
Showing
if not
up's
more,
half the battle.
Yeah.
of the battle.
It is good. It is good.
So it just builds. There's so much built into it, right?
Yeah.
Is that why the resistance training component is so big in Mackie Physiotherapy's like training philosophy?
Yeah. Well, I think, as you guys now know my history, and so does most of the world where the podcast goes, but I think that really built who I am. And just all the stuff we've talked about now is part of the Mackie philosophy. And I think that's a big part of why we've got what we've got. Because I didn't create the facility. Like when we first started, I had a couple of rooms and I had this little 12 by 12 gym.
Mm-hmm.
I had a squat rack, some dumbbells, treadmill, some bands, and that was about it. But the philosophy was integrated into that. Then it grew into what it is now. So we got like 5 squat racks and benches and deadlift platforms, etc. So that same philosophy from which I grew up in is just continued to perpetuate itself forward. And I just like the concept of taking somebody with a low back problem, a neck problem, and then manage them through these basic lifts. However, it can get skewed because I've got some people coming in and says, well, I should go in a hip 90-90 position and lift my ankle 12 times. Okay, sure, go ahead and do that. I'd really like you to do this, though. Let's just see if we can get the good old hip hinge, and I call it the drift.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do a hip drift and see if that will develop too?
Yep.
So I love the basics. There's mind you, having said that, there's so many different variables out there for different strength exercises now. It's off the charts based on the internet.
Yep.
I think it gets confusing for people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think it gets confusing because everybody's trying to do too many things, or even just variety, right? I get some people I'll be training, we'll get them through a little back thing. Oh, I'm getting bored. What's that mean?
Yeah.
Well, you want to change, okay? But you haven't been on that program enough to get adaptive change to that program.
Yep.
But now you want to change.
Yep.
You're going to fail. Yeah, I'm sorry, but you've got to stick a long enough time at that one movement pattern to get that change to make adaptive changes. But people don't like that. They get bored. Well, I'm getting bored. So then what do you do as a coach then? Do you risk losing them because you're not making it variety enough for them, but you're not going to get the gains? Mm-hmm. So then you have to redefine what their goals are.
Yep.
So that's kind of, I think, where Mackie's gone. Very simple, very straightforward. But I also think too that some of the styles out there could be improved.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that. I think we've seen people come into the clinic that have been taught certain things and, okay, not comfortable with that.
Yep.
I'd like to just modify this a little bit, maybe just a few tweaks here and there, just to help them out a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be because maybe some of the other clinicians are not as knowledgeable in certain areas, and that's fine. They're doing their best, but
Yo, it's one of your co-hosts here, guys, Thomas. This episode wound up going for a fairly long run. I think it was around 4 hours at the initial recording. So we're going to cut it off there for today. Stay tuned for part 2 coming next month. Peace.